And welcome to Ardent Cinema, the #1 podcast for a book club style discussion of all things movies. This is a weekly podcast, and we encourage you to follow along as we take a deep dive into each movie's plot, overall themes, what we thought of the acting and directing, our feelings on the film, and more. At the end of each episode, we will announce the movie for next time, so make sure to listen until the end. I am your energetic host, Sean.
I am host numero dos, Daniel Alexander.
Hi, I'm Alejandro. This bi-week, we hope you watch along with us for my pick, Whale Rider, written and directed by Nikki Caro and based on the novel called... Guesses?
Whale Rider?
Whale and Me.
Wrong, The Whale Rider.
A long time ago, my ancestor Paikea came to this place on the back of a whale. Since then, in every generation of my family, the firstborn son has carried his name and become the leader of our tribe.
Her name's Spike.
No. Not that name.
Until now.
When she was born, that's when things went wrong for us. I'm gonna need all the firstborn boys. That's where we'll find the answer. This will be a sacred school of learning. You'll be taught in all the qualities of a chief. Go to the back.
How come you won't let you do it? Girls aren't allowed.
Meet your enemies. Feel the fear.
He's got a lot of rules he has to live by. It's not fair.
Keep her away. It's distracting for the boys.
That old pucker's not the only one who knows some tricks.
Could you teach me? Yes.
You will be tested for your strength, your courage, and your leadership. But there can only be one. What have you done? You knew this wasn't for you.
I'm sorry, Paka.
You don't mess around with sacred things.
Why doesn't he want me?
He's just looking for something that doesn't exist anymore.
A new leader. They exist.
There's one final test. A test of your spirit.
It's become even more than that. He needs a prophet.
My name is Paikea Apirana, and I come from a long line of chiefs.
It is starring Keisha Castle Hughes as Paikea, Rawari Paraten as Koro. This is going to be really tough, guys. Vicky Houghton as Nana, Cliff Curtis as Pororangi, and Grant Roa as Uncle Rawari. So, same name there. The movie's from 2002. I'd seen it a few times, but not for many years. It's probably been a good decade for me. I don't know. Have you guys ever seen this one?
First time. I hadn't even heard of it until you mentioned it.
Yeah, same here.
Cool. I chose it because I thought it would be a good companion piece for our last episode, which was Don't Let Me Go. They're two coming-of-age stories, obviously at different points in their lives, but yeah, I thought it would be a nice comparison considering there's character narration in the beginning, two coming-of-age stories about a young girl, and dealing with societal struggles.
Can I interject for a moment?
Yeah.
You mentioned the credits. Cliff Curtis. He's probably the most well-known actor that I could tell from this movie. That man has played so many different ethnicities at this point. I mean, I've seen him in Training Day as like a Chicano banger. I've seen him in True Lies as like a Muslim, terrorist. He's played like about every non-white ethnicity, non-Asian ethnicity for the most part that you can think of. So it's interesting seeing him here as Māori.
Yeah, that's true. Do either of you want to do a little plot synopsis, or should I take that?
Why don't you take it since it was your movie?
All right, so it's the story of this girl, Paikea, who's born under very difficult circumstances. Both her mother and twin brother died at her birth, and she kind of has to deal with this guilt because her grandfather was putting all his expectations on her twin brother to bring their people out of this kind of dark age and bring back their cultural heritage. Her father kind of takes off after that, and it's really about her trying to come to terms with her place in the community and come into her own. Would you say that sums it up?
Yeah, that about sums it up. Yeah, we'll get into more plot specific points as we discuss the film, but yeah, I think that's a good summary or synopsis rather of what occurs. What'd you think of the film overall? I guess just to start with.
Well, personally, I really loved it. What makes it for me is there's a lot of genuine charm and identity that I really feel transports me into another world. I really like movies like that, where I'm not thinking so externally. I'm just kind of engrossed in another culture or another place that I'm completely unfamiliar with, but I instantly feel an association with these people that I would normally never associate with. So that comes down to set design, performances, music, all these kind of things that makes it. How genuine it is, I don't know, but it feels incredibly genuine to me.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It definitely felt very genuine and grounded. I really enjoyed the pacing of the film. It was a little bit on the slow side, but I never minded that. I felt it was fitting to what the story was trying to tell. And just the way something about this film felt very mystical, and very mystical and spiritual. And the way that they paralleled the migrations of the whales to Pika's, life growing up, I thought was very interesting.
I think a lot of that comes down to the score and the beginning narration. It really sets it up as a fairy tale, at least in my mind. We're about to watch a dark fairy tale where we're going to learn a lesson, and who knows what's going to happen to our main characters. Will they come out of it? Probably not,
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Don't Make Me Go, the movie we watched for last time's episode. There's a lot of parallels to that, and I even had a note later on. Is there going to be another, young female character that's just going to die for the purpose of this older person to learn a lesson? Like, does it really take their death for this person to realize, like, hey, maybe I should change my ways?
That was completely intentional.
Yeah, there was, definitely that specific. We'll get into that moment later, but that moment in the end, I was definitely thinking that as well. I was like, oh my gosh, here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though I'd seen it before, I was kind of wondering, wait a moment, whose story is this? And until you find out the result of what happens to her, you're not really sure.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting that looking back at it, you definitely feel like Koro was almost a second main character in this film, with the amount of lessons that he had to learn and the amount of growth that he had to go through as well. But I guess he's also the antagonist of the film.
Yeah, no way.
But not an antagonist in the traditional sense, because he's not just he's not rooting for Pika to fail per se, but he has good intentions. He's the chief. He's trying to uphold the traditions of his people, of the Maori people, and tradition states that only a male firstborn son can become the heir, and become the next chieftain. So he was just trying to instill those principles, but the way he was going about it with his granddaughter, had a lot of antagonistic properties as well. So you see him struggle with that, because you see that he also does love his granddaughter
1,000%,
very much.
Right.
In the very beginning, he shows a lot of disdain. He doesn't even want to see the baby. He hates the fact that his son named her Pika, because Pika was the name of the original, the first whale rider.
This legendary ancestor.
The legendary ancestor of which they are the bloodline.
Right. It's supposed to be a direct bloodline from him
direct
to their family.
bloodline, firstborn son.
Yes.
That's what was needed. So when he named her Pika, he was like, no, not that name, anything but that name. But they went with it. And eventually then you see he starts forgetting about that a little bit and starts loving her. And he rides her to, he rides the bike. He rides her to school with his bike and picks her up. And everything seems okay at that point. But
For a while, yeah.
For a while. But I think it's the return of the son that then brings back those memories and brings back his need for tradition to the point where he kind of says, you know what? I forgot my place. My place is chieftain, not just being a grandfather.
Well, at that point, also, he realizes there's no hope for his son. I think he always held out a little bit that he was going to return and take his place. And then now he comes back with this white girlfriend. He's having a baby who's going to raise in Norway. He's doing this pretentious art that has no value to the community. And he, you know, at that point, he realizes, I need to do this or it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned that because even the way that all that's revealed, so I guess a little bit of backstory on that. The father leaves at some point after Paikea is born and is traveling the world. Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, like it really, maybe just because the way that they shot the birth scene, the father seemed a lot older than maybe what he actually was, because when he returns to visit the family and we come to find out that he's there to tell them that he's met someone I think in Germany and they're having a child. He is dressed and acts in a way that I remember I was somewhat when I was in my 20s. Mm-hmm. And that just kind of threw me off a little bit. So I think what they're trying to get at is he was a very young father, seemingly always doing things for the sake of his dad. But after Paikea was born, really tried to get away from that. He really tried to live his own life, so to speak, and travel the world. And, you know, you call his art pretentious. I would just say, you know, he's doing art because that's all he really knows how to do, because of the fact that he left seemingly so early, and anything that's related to his Māori heritage he wants to get away from. Even the way that he dresses, even the way that he talks is a lot different than Koro, the grandfather, and the rest of the family. So the way that the scene is laid out where he ultimately tells them is interesting, because Koro brings in a very pretty school teacher to potentially set him up with. And he just, once he realizes this, he casually just lets them know, like, hey, I'm already, you know, with somebody and she's actually pregnant. So again, that's another example, I think, of him really trying to escape his heritage. And in this case, just put a stop to his father's insistence on keeping the old ways and, you know, returning to the island to be with the family and continue this, you know, lineage.
Yeah, I see that. I also feel bad for Koro because I understand and I respect his view on obligation, because it appears that he raised his son under the pretense that the strengths and values he was instilling in his son were going to be returned to the community to strengthen it, right? Even if he doesn't become chief leader or whatever, there's still value in strong, healthy young men in this kind of dying culture or this dying town. We see later on how few of those there are. Like, we have this pretty teacher, right, there doesn't seem to be a reason that she hasn't found a husband. She seems like she wants to find one. But we don't see any men of her age really in the town that are upstanding. We see a couple who are like gangbangers or hanging around in crack houses, pretty much.
That's true. You know, that brings up a good point. A lot of the representation of at least the men in the culture, even some of the women, some of the older women, you know, they're chain smoking, they're playing cards, things like that, you know, seemingly non-traditional acts outside of their heritage or their culture. So yeah, a lot of the depictions of the people, now that you bring that up, of the adults, are very like counterculture, and they're really more living in like modern times, whereas Koro's like desperately trying to hold on to their tradition and trying to, in some case, you know, force it upon them, because he sees that the culture is dying out. Maybe not so much the people, but the culture is ultimately going away.
So I feel Poro's loss at his son moving away.
Yeah, I personally felt one thing actually that could have made the film a little stronger for me was I kind of wish they would show that off a little bit more, showing the community kind of going downhill. Because like most of the movie, I was kind of thinking to myself, where is everybody? a lot of the time. Like it was a lot of the time it was like the school children, the teacher, and the main family, right? I never really saw many adult males walking around till the whale scene at the end, where they're all coming to help and stuff.
I like that that's a background detail, and it stays very character based. You can kind of infer that there's an entire generation that didn't stick around. So what you're left with is the elderly and their grandchildren, pretty much in this community.
I want to interject for a moment. You actually do see it a few times. Alejandro mentions one of the young school children's fathers comes to see him do a Maori traditional performance, and immediately after, the guy just bolts and goes with his friends, and they're all smoking, and they're all, again, kind of counterculture to what a lot of the traditional Maori people are wearing and acting. And then you also see a lot of, I guess, the friends of the uncle and
Uncle
his
Rauri.
Yeah, exactly. And his girlfriend. Like there are a few guys that are like always hanging around with him.
Yeah.
And they're hanging around like on a couch outside, or just kind of like in more rundown places. So again, the few examples you see of like the adult men they're always just kind of hanging around, or they're always trying to drive away. Or even towards the end with the performance in the school, like those two same guys that are hanging out with the uncle, they're like trying to get out of there. Like the moment like all the traditional songs are going on, they literally get up, and Nanny, the grandmother, has to go, sit back down.
Yeah, that was a great moment. They still have respect for their elders.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I guess I had partially expected the community to also want this chieftain heir, to express some sort of desire, but I suppose it was not really the movie wasn't about a community problem. It was more about the personal family. It was seemingly a personal problem for Koro, because he seemed to be the only one that really desired this.
I mean, yeah, you could say that. I think there's definitely hints of a group of elders that he speaks to. We know he organizes this school for the young children with some other leaders of the community. So that might be credit to your point that we don't really see too much of that. You just kind of have to infer they're there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't imagine it's just him, but yeah, it's mainly focused on his problem with it.
Yeah, on his like personal desire to bring back the old ways, which, yeah, at first glance didn't seem like the community was on board with it, or not really on board, but they didn't really care, it seemed, for the most part, except a group of elders and then the kids that they were trying to like teach.
Yeah.
And even with the kids, the main kid besides Pai that they focus on, Hemi, he's a chain smoker. The first time we see him, if I'm not mistaken, Pai goes up to him and he's just smoking, like right on the school grounds.
Oh yeah, that kid definitely has some behavioral problems, probably rightly so, considering his home life. We get a lot of hints at his home life. What was his name? Remy?
Hemi.
Yeah, Paika's, I guess, best friend. She doesn't really have too many friends her own age. Is Remy, Hemi, this boy who's kind of a school bully, kind of a punk, but he's not too bad. He seems like a good kid underneath. He just has some behavioral problems. We get some hints at a tough home life. Something I noticed was that the clothing that the designers give this child give a lot of clues to his home life. He's wearing baggy clothes. Everything he's wearing is very baggy. Usually military fatigues for pants, and always a sports jersey. And once, actually, an oversized polo with the number 10 on the back, but with scotch tape.
I saw that, yeah.
I kind of inferred a lot from that. After we see his father, I think I could guess that his father was probably a big high school athlete, at least according to his, through his son's eyes, he hears about it. Maybe went off and joined the military and then came back to kind of bum around in his hometown and, barely raise his child. And you see everything's oversized. That kid's probably home alone trying to scrounge for hand-me-downs and maybe going to the Salvation Army for clothes.
Yeah, that's a good observation there.
In addition to that, first time we see him, it's right after Pai decides to stay on the island, because after the father comes back, he convinces her, at least initially, to come back with him to Germany.
Yeah.
She decides to stay, ultimately. And the next thing we see is her at the school and meeting Hemi. And basically he says, I can't wait to get out of here. You know, the very first thing we see of him is smoking, you know, very counter to like the Maori tradition, the way he dresses, the way he acts, the way he talks. And he's like, I can't wait to get out of here. So again, another example of him not only being a product of his home life, but also being a product of the lack of cultural heritage that is being adhered to, that everyone, to your guys' point earlier, wanted to get out of here because they don't see any future living on this island if they're not going to adhere to the traditions of the elders.
Yeah.
And speaking of Hemi, it was interesting to see Koro kind of start looking at him as a possible future chieftain. Like, you notice that when they begin training and all that, and it doesn't seem even that Hemi is doing an amazing job. You know, he just seems kind of
the best of the worst.
The best of the worst, exactly. But
Yeah.
Koro just seems desperate at this point, like just content with whatever he has, and he's willing to overlook the physical deficiencies of Hemi in favor of, instead of, looking to Paika, who seemed better in every way. You slowly see that she knows the chants better than anyone. She knows about the tradition more than anyone. She cares more than anyone else. Right. And then you see later on in the film, she's actually physically better than all of the boys. She beats Hemi at the stick battle. I forgot the name of the sport.
Yeah, me too.
But the traditional stick fighting, they get into a fight and she beats him, and Koro sees that and pretty much kicks Hemi out of the group because he lost to Paika. So you see that. And then there was the final test where Koro takes these boys out into the bay, out into deep waters, and he carries a whale tooth that was very special to him. I believe it's passed down.
Oh, for sure.
And he takes it off and he throws it into the water, and he tells the boys to go get it. And the one who gets it will become chief.
Imagine 100 generations of throwing that in the water and then bringing it back, and then and then this.
Yeah. So all the boys come into the water, they all come back out, but with nothing, empty-handed, and you just see Koro like heartbroken, like he's just in shock by this, as if I guess it's never happened before. So it just shows like how much it has deteriorated. And then you see later, Paika is the one that goes down and gets it, as well as catches a lobster.
Yeah.
That was impressive.
That was. And I thought it was really funny when she puts the lobster on the boat. She says, for Koro's tea.
Yeah.
This is mentioned twice. Is this a Maori thing? What kind of tea do you make with lobster? Do you guys know?
I've never heard of it.
If I had to assume, maybe they extract some of the juices from the lobster and then they'll add that to the tea. Maybe, or maybe they'll boil the lobster and some of the broth they'll use in the tea. Yeah, maybe. I wanted to bring up one point. Just the thought occurred to me. Was Koro a former representation of Paikea? Because he's the chief, and
yes.
I'm not sure. Yes.
Yes.
I think so.
He's an heir. He's part of the bloodline. It just continues down the bloodline.
But do we know whether he was like the firstborn that inherited the title of Paikea?
Oh, do you think his name? You bring up a really great point, because his name is Koro. Koro translates in Maori to, it's a term of respect for elderly man. So I was wondering, what's his name? He only has a title. He doesn't have a name. So That could be it. Every firstborn is literally called Paika.
No, because his firstborn wasn't called Paika.
Damn, that's true.
The father, yeah.
I don't think that's the case. I think the father just decided to name her that because his wife literally said it out loud before she died. If you guys remember that, during
Right, she
childbirth,
did.
she
Yeah.
said Pika. It was her last dying breath. So with that, and I think it was also an act of defying his father, because the father, you know, he was crying, he was distraught, like the you know, Pororangi, the father of
Nice.
Pika. Yeah, I got it in the first try. And the first thing the grandfather does is like, "Where's the son?"
Yeah, I almost felt like he wouldn't have called his daughter Pika if he
Yeah,
didn't
exactly.
do that.
Yeah, he like totally did not care about his son's grieving at all. He was just kind of like, "Where's my firstborn heir, chieftain?"
And the second thing he says is, yeah, you can try again.
Yeah, immediately. Yeah, you can get another one. Don't worry. Like, he's like, yeah, pretty much. He was like, "No, you know what? That's Pika
This is
right there.
Pika."
This is Pika." He's like, "No."
Yeah, the way he goes about it obviously is terrible. I will say the first thing he does is hug his son. And then he starts saying all of that.
Yeah, he's not inhuman, just
Right.
pretty close to it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I guess then the mantle of Paikia is inherited every few generations, something like that. I guess maybe that's something that I didn't quite understand about the film, is like, how do they know who inherits the mantle of Paikia? Because you say it's the firstborn, but is it the firstborn who goes through all these trials and then is anointed the title of Paikia, or they do some extraordinary act, which, you know, our Paikia ultimately does towards the end of the film? I wonder how that works.
I
exactly.
firmly believe it's supposed to be every firstborn son.
Mhm.
However, in this case, Koro's firstborn son was not up to the task, or he did not want it. So
that-
it had to be then the next one, essentially.
It's possible. I also think that could be the case, but maybe Pika is not necessarily a title, but more like a revered name, like Mohammed. You know, that's their elder, whatever, their god.
So do you think because the father's firstborn son passed away and the father didn't inherit that name, or however you want to think about it, that's why the troubles came to the island? Is that what we're supposed to understand, that because of the troubles of the father and the circumstances of the birth, that was what started the downward trend of the culture?
Well, that's Koro's belief, that the line was broken and that's what caused it.
Okay.
He
Yeah, I guess I'm
believes that,
understanding
but the reality seems to be that
It was degrading
it's
for a
been
while.
degrading
already.
for a long time.
Yeah.
They didn't suddenly, the community suddenly didn't become these, like, you know, drug addicts and lowlifes, you know, all out of nowhere after the birth. Like, it's been happening. That's why Koro's been so desperately trying to get the next chief, you know. You know, so yeah, he's been trying for, now it was like 20 plus years, because his son already didn't want to do it. His son was, and we don't really ever learn why the son never went for it, right? I don't think he
Never went for what?
for chieftain.
It seems like he was on the path, but his father still had that title and respect. That's probably where he was headed.
Plus, I think that's right, and also it would have continued had the birth gone well, and, you know, his wife had lived. I think the circumstances of that birth and his firstborn son passing away and his wife also passing away during childbirth, I think led to his disillusionment with the culture at large.
Okay.
I want to go back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. We were mentioning Koro's transformation. And I had this thought as I was watching it, that Koro never has a character transformation. The only thing that happens is he sees evidence within his belief system that override the no girls rule. Not that he suddenly becomes a feminist and sees modern ways.
That is very true.
You know, she collects the whale tooth and literally rides a whale. And that's enough for him.
Well, it helps. It is, in a sense, a transformation, because, I mean, it's sort of within his belief system, but not really, because he always thought that it was supposed to be only a male. So that's gonna, I think, forever change his mind on the female role in this culture and the potential that they have.
I see what you're saying. The result is the same. Like now he has a more progressive mindset. I just feel like it was within his indoctrinated views already. It wasn't like somebody convinced him that he was wrong, which I feel is a character difference.
I see what you're saying, but I wouldn't want him to feel wrong about anything else other than that fact. Like there was no other transformation that I would have wanted him to get, like, because I felt in everything else he was okay. His desire to continue the family line, I don't think was a negative thing or something that needed to change. It just needed to be his views on women in this society and what they can do and the potential that they have for the culture.
Yeah, I'm happy with how it turned out, and I don't think you can really ask for more. I really do. I actually like that it wasn't a drastic character shift, and it was more of a natural progression of the in-universe events. A man of his age and his level of indoctrination, it would have felt too cheesy if he had a big character shift.
Yeah, I wouldn't have liked it if all of a sudden he's like, who cares about the culture? Da, 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 da. It wouldn't have made sense.
Yeah.
Given the character's history.
And sometimes that's all you can ask for, right?
Yeah.
It's a slight shift.
Yep.
Yeah, not all change needs to be transformational. In this case, it's a slight adjustment in his views, in this case, towards women and their role within the society. I mean, you even see at the end, as they are pushing the finished boat into the water, I think you see women that are also joining in the pushing of the boat as well. Whereas if that were to happen in the beginning, I don't think they would have been there. I think they would have been on the sidelines and all the men would have been there pushing the boat in instead.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, it's
there still weren't any women paddling.
No, I didn't notice that. I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure there were.
There were women on the boat for sure.
There were some butch women paddling.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, there you go.
But speaking of character choices that the filmmakers made that I really liked was not having the easy route of making Paikea feel guilty. See, when I first saw the intro, I thought it was going to be this big story of Paikea getting over the guilt of being the survivor and having her brother die and her mother die. And you can almost see that scene written in the kitchen where she's yelling with her grandfather, "Do you wish it was me who had died?" That kind of scene. And I like that she was mature enough to be sad about it, maybe even wish it was her brother who had lived, but never feel guilty for her survival or feel guilty that it was her fault.
I also liked that Paikea never really felt guilty about her attempts to learn the cultures against her father or grandfather's wishes. She did feel bad that it was making him upset, and that she was defying him, but at the same time she felt like that's just what she needed to do. Like it was calling to her, and I think a part of her like always knew that. You first see that when her father's trying to take her away, and she just looks out in the ocean and she maybe gets a glimpse of a whale or something. I'm not sure what she sees, but she just
I felt like she heard them, right? The window was open. You catch them singing in the distance.
So yeah, she either heard or saw them, and she just felt this inner desire to just go back. Like she couldn't leave. Like she had a purpose there, and that you feel that throughout the film.
Yeah, that's a recurring theme for sure.
So I'm of a mixed mind of what you guys are saying, because on the one hand, yeah, I agree, she doesn't express any guilt towards surviving, towards being the one who lived instead of her twin brother. But after they find the beached whales the next morning, there is some narration from her where she essentially says she blames herself for calling the whales and causing them to be beached on the shore. So there are a few times where some of the circumstances that occur, she blames herself for it. I think more so because she's actually hearing this from her grandfather directly or indirectly. I mean, soon after, she walks up to him on the beach next to Paikea's whale, and without saying it, he pretty much implies that this is her fault. You know, he doesn't want her to touch the whale, and basically implies like this is her fault that this is all going on. So I found that to be realistic, that, you know, as a child, she's hearing a parent or a family member basically blaming her for something, or directly implying it at the very least. And she internalizes that and says, yeah, maybe he is right. Ultimately, she learns that he isn't right. But I think that's a good position of the movie or the filmmakers to take, which is, you know, she's not so obstinate against his ideals that she would be so independent about like the way that she thinks about all this, beyond the fact that, you know, she still wants to learn and, you know, contribute. So I found that interesting. So on the one hand, while she isn't guilty necessarily, or feels guilty about the fact that her brother died and she didn't, but at the same time, she hears this guilt from her grandfather and internalizes it and think maybe he is right, and ultimately he isn't.
Well, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I wasn't personally talking about the guilt from the whales getting beached. I think that's a whole different thing. Like I was talking about, like, she never really felt guilty about her desire to try and integrate herself into the culture.
Right.
And she didn't feel guilty about the fact that her brother died. You know, she feels obviously sad about it, but not guilty. However, I think she felt guilty about the beached whale situation because the night before, she was actually out in the water and she was calling to them. She was calling to them for assistance.
Funny enough, so was Koro though, at the same time.
And so was Koro, right.
But Koro doesn't blame himself. I don't think even for a moment he does, which is an interesting character trait.
Yes.
Or character moment.
That's true.
I have thoughts on that, because going back real quick to our conversation about how this mantle of Paikea is passed on through the generations, I wonder if he had some failings as a potential holder of the mantle of Paikea. So because of some of his failings, he's trying to make up for that now at his older age. Where so he is really trying to instill this culture into, you know, the community now at this late stage in his life, as opposed to, you know, 20 years ago. Because the way he seems, like, I get the sense, like, why didn't he try to do this before? You know, there's a lot of time that passes where he's not, I mean, seemingly not trying to instill all these, like, cultural ideas as fervently as he does now. Like, he doesn't see the urgency in it, seemingly over time, until, you know, present events in the movie.
Well, like we talked about earlier, I thought that he had always instilled a lot of hope still in his son returning and bringing his worldly travel and experience to strengthen this community. It wasn't until that very moment that he realizes there's no hope for that. And it's the next day when he creates that school, the very next day of this event.
Yeah, I think before that school's created, all the moments before that, it's always been about the direct bloodline descendant. So really the only hope Koro ever had was the son. Koro wasn't going to try to have another child at this point, and it couldn't be the second-born son, according to the tradition. So yeah, he kind of had to wait. He kind of had to wait for his son to come back and either take over the mantle or bear another son. And then that's when he saw that it didn't happen, then he had to take matters into his own hands and start kind of, you know, doing a Hail Mary, essentially.
Right. It just seems like he more fervently does so now. I agree with you, because of the fact that he sees the son not really engaging with that. But I never got the sense that even while the son was traveling for many years, that he made too many overtures to the son to get him to come back. I mean, the son mentions that he sent a bunch of postcards, or actually, excuse me, Koro mentions that, oh yeah, your mom had put some of the postcards in the fridge. but that's about it. So on the one hand, I agree with you. Yeah, he had to wait, but on the other hand, it didn't really seem like he tried his best to reach out to his son all that often. He was kind of, passive in terms of waiting for the son, as if almost to, move beyond this as a phase.
Well, Nana, Koro's wife, tells him right in the beginning, "You give that boy some time," and he took it very literally.
Exactly. He's so passive in it, and then just does a 180 and is very fervent about it now.
It's possible. I didn't get that impression of guilt, but I wouldn't put it past the writers to have put that forward.
Right.
Something I noticed, well, I thought, was that there's a lot of irony that Koro has a disdain for Paikea's masculine traits, her stubbornness, her wanting to lead, her wanting to be included, her being a pillar of the community when she should be, passive as a woman or whatever. The irony is that she gets that from him. He raised her, and you can see when she looks at him all the admiration and love and respect she has for Koro. I have a feeling that's where all of her powerful traits come from viewing him and wanting to follow in his footsteps, and then he responds with disdain. That must be terribly heartbreaking for her.
I like the scene where all the women are smoking. Right. And then Paika goes up to them and says, "You need to stop smoking."
She's a leader right off the bat. Yeah.
She says, "You need to." What was the phrase?
You need to protect your
childbearing properties. And I was like, okay, wow. How old is this girl to be saying that? You could tell she's been pretty much taught by Koro all these
to look
ways.
after the community, right?
Right, exactly. So she was pretty much born to lead.
Yeah, and not taught directly. Like, again, he never tried to teach her these things. She was just watching him.
Just watching and just practicing in the back. You see her just always peeking into the school where they're trying to learn about the traditions, and she's the one. She's like, she can barely hear them, and she's still trying to learn all the phrases, all the chants and all that, which she does. And she goes out of her way to learn the stick fighting with the uncle, who I really liked that character, and I thought that was really good casting.
Rawiri, yeah, he's fantastic.
Yeah, he was a good level of, like, I guess a little bit of comedic relief.
Yeah, he brings some levity,
like
for
subtle,
sure.
Yeah. And casting wise, he looked a lot like the brother. Like, I thought they were they could have been really brothers. Right. Yeah. So I really enjoyed that.
By the way, Rawiri translates to beloved one, loved by the whole community.
Oh, wow.
So
and he was
perfect. Yeah.
He was. The one instance where you don't see that kind of is when Nani is talking about him at a certain point. Oh, telling Pai that he used to be good at staff wielding and that whole thing. And she goes, before he was fat and ugly, he was, a champion, and he won a medal even, or won an award for it. But then look at him now, So there's even in her eyes, she sees the path that he's taken and is a little, I guess, partially disappointed and a little despondent because of it. So, which again could be more of a reflection on Koro's parenting than maybe hers, but maybe she feels a little bit of guilt about that too.
Yeah. You do see this beloved innate trait in him. This actually comes into play in the story when Koro is asking him to gather up the men to try and lift this whale tail, right? And he's telling his father that they're completely wiped. They can't do anything else. And he tells Rawiri, they'll do it for you. That's who he is. He brings people together.
Yeah, it almost seems like he was another missed opportunity to become a chief.
Oh, yeah, he definitely could have been.
Because, again, the champion, stick fighter, he was beloved by everyone. He seemed like a good choice. But what happened? Koro stuck to his guns in terms of tradition about it having to be the firstborn son. And he made up his mind. Didn't matter what the son did.
Yeah, screw it. I'm going to hang out in this crack house with my friends.
Yeah.
Crack house.
Bro, when she first visits her uncle and she's going through the house, I'm like, what is this crack house that she just found? There's people playing pool and it's like the wallpaper is peeling, there's trash everywhere. He's hanging out on a couch outside that looks like it's been peed on by 1,000 dogs.
Oh my goodness. The them being on the couch outside reminded me a bit of The Wire, where especially that first season you see a lot of the characters hanging out on a particular couch and, you know, having a lot of dialogue and reflection of the, you know, the events that have been going on. So yeah, it's very interesting. I saw a lot of parallels between that.
Mm-hmm. An interesting way they kind of showed Paikea's position as the reincarnated Paikea. Early on, you see her fixing a boat with her grandfather, right? And he's explaining to her that the ancestors are like the individual threads of a rope, and together they are strong. And he pulls the rope on the engine, and it breaks. He goes off. Paikea ties it together, and easily rips the cord, and the engine starts. Right? She's the one who was going to bring their ancestors together, bring the community together. That had to have been intentional.
Yeah, definitely. That was a really good moment.
You hear the music swell, and the camera pulls in, and they're telling us right away, this is her.
And also, another thing I noticed in the very beginning of the film, during the childbirth section, you see the parallels with they're like cutting between like the whales underwater and the birth going on.
I didn't notice that.
And there's a part where I believe it kind of cuts from like the eye of Paika to the eye of the whale. I think in the next shot, either that or I forgot how the maybe it was like a dissolved transition into the whale's eye, which I felt kind of was a representation of the connection that they had from birth.
And maybe that's literally Paikea's whale that gets beached later on, you know?
Maybe.
I understood that it was. It looked exactly the same. It was as big as it. As Koro's walking up to like the largest beach whale, the narration says that is Paikea's whale, and it looked very similar in size and in looks to that whale from the beginning. So
yeah, I mean,
I would assume
it certainly was the biggest whale,
right?
And it was the whale that once Paikea climbed on top of it, it just unbeached itself pretty much. It was just waiting for Paikea, essentially.
And it has these, I don't know what you call them, these deposits that form on the top of whales that were like perfectly positioned to climb up on and grab, almost like a saddle.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a good
I thought it was very cool.
Yeah, definitely. You know, soon after that, as she's riding the whale into the water and she lets go, which is kind of a terrifying scene.
That was terrifying. You can feel it being out there.
They show it again, or they show the whale afterwards, and then they show another whale below it. I guess I don't know if that was meant to represent Paikea in her quote unquote like true form, so to speak, as like kind of a leader, similar in size to like the Paikea's whale. But I thought for a moment, this movie's mystical enough that I could see, her transforming into the whale temporarily and then, then transforming back and, she washes ashore soon after that.
That or it's representative of something that I didn't quite catch. If any of our listeners have any thoughts, leave a comment. We'd love to know what you guys think about that.
Speaking of terrifying scenes, the one you mentioned a couple minutes ago on the engine, when she pulls that engine.
Oh, man.
They kept zooming into like the engine, like where it's revving in the water, and I got terrified for a moment. Like, oh, is she gonna like slip in there, or is like her foot's gonna slip in there and like showcase the danger of, getting into this world, so to speak.
That's why it was such a great moment. They do this camera zoom, which tells the audience something significant and important is gonna happen, and it's a red herring because your initial thought is she's gonna get her hand chopped off. You don't know that it's telling us this significant character detail yet. You're just thinking this little girl's playing with an engine.
Yeah, and she's like dangling her feet practically like over the thing.
Yeah. I was also, speaking of the whales though, I was very impressed with the practical effects of the beached whales.
I loved it. I mean that had to be real, not CGI.
Claymation, actually.
Claymation?
Yeah, stop motion claymation.
Got it.
No, but so I had seen this movie before, and I loved that when I never even considered what are those. Is that to me, it was just those are whales on the beach. It never looks fake for a second. That was incredibly impressive.
So it was CGI.
Yeah. Stupid.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I think it was CGI.
They didn't beach a bunch of whales for this movie?
They did. The CGI was the people.
I mean, it is New Zealand, and I think
okay.
them and
Sorry.
the
Yeah.
Japanese are notorious for not being too friendly to aquatic life, we'll say.
They killed a bunch of whales.
That's why they couldn't
That's
make
counterintuitive.
a number 2. That's why they got
Well,
shut down.
Oh my goodness.
Because they killed all the whales.
Yeah.
Wow.
Extinct.
I mean, even when Paikio was riding the whale, we only see like the top part of it. You only see like certain shots of it. So I wonder if it was just maybe an animatronic that they built, that was hollow, that was just there. And then they had it, the blowhole being activated. They just shoot water.
They did
through
an
and stuff.
amazing job with the texture.
Mhm.
Like those close-ups of the blowhole and all
Amazing.
that were really incredible. I would love to see some behind the scenes of this. Does the Blu-ray have it?
It does. I know they don't go into detail about how they created it, but they do mention that they obviously did make those. They go into detail on how they made the large canoe we see at the end. That was a very big project, actually. That's a huge rowing canoe.
No, that was CGI.
You
They're
shut your
just
mouth.
they're just seated. They're in front of a green screen in a seated position, and then they just transpose them onto the boat. That's why you never see them move. You only see their arms move.
They do move. What are you talking about?
I think most of the visuals, they were beautiful, by the way. Like a lot of like the landscape shots were exceptionally beautiful. I mean,
You can do a lot with a little money if you have the right location. Yeah.
this is a great tourism movie for New Zealand.
Absolutely.
Which they did get a lot of money from the New Zealand government, so that absolutely was
Did
part of the
they?
intention. Yeah,
Really, I didn't know that. Huh.
for sure. How'd you guys feel about the music?
I really enjoyed it. It wasn't, this epic score or anything, because obviously the movie didn't call for anything like that. It was a lot of subtle orchestral swells and slow moving notes that kind of just felt it lent itself to the mysticism of the film, and it almost kind of emulated the waves personally. So it was a mix of that, and there were moments of tribal beats that will be playing subtly, and then the scenes with the chants, it was its own score essentially. Sometimes during the chant you would hear the score underneath it kind of lifting it just a little bit, almost as if it's almost like if it's the whales kind of singing along with the person chanting.
I think they actually do incorporate some whale songs in the soundtrack sometimes.
Oh wow,
Interesting.
I thought so anyway.
yeah, that might be true.
I like it because it sets up. So the movie kind of follows a traditional Hollywood formula. It's not too. It doesn't deviate too much, but the score does a really good job of making you expect tragedy. At least it did for me. Right off the bat and throughout it, I'm not expecting any happy ending, and then when there is one, it's an extra bonus.
Right. I liked the music accompaniment during the examples of like the tradition, like the chanting and things like that. The background music that kind of expanded that and really helped, define that. I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of over like music as an accompaniment for like mysticism, like that kind of music.
You're over
I don't
music?
know. What's that? No, not over. Yes, I'm over music.
Music, I'm done with it.
No, just I've seen so many movies now that use that kind of orchestral swell to like denote a sense of mysticism, and to me, I don't know, maybe it's just a weird thing that I have, but I'm just kind of over it, to be honest.
I agree with you. I felt it was done subtly enough that it didn't bother me, but on the
It was
whole,
rare.
I agree with you. I'm getting tired of hearing the Assassin's Creed to denote some epic moment. I'm done with it.
Yeah, it was used sparingly, so I will give it that. It was really just when they were showcasing the whale, like that musical cue, I was just kind of over it. I was like, okay, here's another one. Here's
I
another
mean, I think
mysticism.
maybe you're over it because it's overused, but I think it still has its place in cinema, and I think this was a prime example of where it worked.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? I think that's the only thing kind of keeping you from enjoying it more is the fact that we've heard in every other thing. But I don't see any other kind of score working for this. I don't see really like, you know, arpeggiated violins and all this. Like, what else are you gonna put there? It felt like that was what was needed. Just enough to elevate those moments a little further.
I 1,000% agree with you. To be clear, my disposition on it has nothing to do with like the quality of it necessarily. It's just a personal take. I'm just kind of over it. But yeah, I definitely agree. It definitely expanded on those themes and made it much more visceral, for sure.
Something I thought that was funny was that the only reason Paikea and Rawiri are over the spot where Koro had thrown his whale tooth is because they're just day drinking on their boat in the middle of the day. that was literally the only reason. And they bring up, hey, this is the spot where he threw his tooth, and she dives right in.
Yeah, I when I first saw that, all I can think of was, wow, how convenient. You know, like it did feel a little like just to get that beat out of the way, you know, like. But
it fit everything. Oh, they just day drink, you know.
But of all places,
nobody has a job.
Of all places to be on the boat, you know, it's a big ocean.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Unless that's like a favorite spot of the family where they like to hang out in that area.
Could have been a nice spot, yeah.
Or maybe that's a good spot where they generally catch lobsters. You know, maybe, you know what I mean? But like when you first see it, it's like, okay, you happen to be at the spot. Oh, there's the tooth should be right about there.
One thing that alleviates that a bit for me is that it felt like there was a time jump. I had felt like with the cut that they made, it seemed like at least a week had passed, if not more. So it's like, okay, within that time, once they ended up there.
They happened to end up there eventually.
Right.
Okay. I could see that.
A little bit more, at least.
A little bit more.
You know, I understood that as Pai, maybe off screen, asking her uncle to take them where the tooth was lost. Like that's how I read that scene, that it was very direct because she was on the boat with them for a purpose. You know, throughout the movie, she's very focused, she's very driven, goal oriented in terms of, you know, saving the community and reestablishing the culture. So I more understood that was deliberate on her part.
I would like to see that scene again and just kind of see her reactions to it, to see if there's intention in her.
Now that he mentions it, it might have been her who asked and not Rawiri who mentions it. So that could be it.
Pretty sure she asked.
Oh yeah.
Him.
Okay. All right.
Like
I'm feeling better about that moment now. Yeah.
Me too.
Okay.
There was something, you know, before I forget this, we talk about like funny moments. At least 2 times or maybe 3 times in the film, Nanny mentions to Pai both times, I'm gonna divorce that man.
You say the word.
You say the word. I'm gonna and I'll divorce him.
When Paikea gets home and Nanny is packing her bag, at first I thought she was packing her bag.
I thought the same exact thing.
Like,
I thought, she's finally doing it.
Yeah. That's great.
I can't believe she accepted having her granddaughter move away. I was pretty surprised by that, actually.
Accepted it because it was for her sake, not because not because Koro had asked her to leave. I'm sorry. They sometimes refer to him as Paka, so that's why I slipped up. Paka means like annoyance, so people call him an old Paka.
Oh, okay. Crazy old Paka.
And funny enough, she calls him Paka as a term of endearment. So there's some incongruency there, right?
I don't think so.
She calls him Paka.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying that's a little typical of families. Like sometimes they'll call each other something that's not necessarily a nice thing, but it as a term of endearment. Like, for example, my stepfather, Roger, he has a grandson that actually calls him Stinky.
Okay, I see that.
It's just a fun thing.
I liked it, although it did throw me off for a while. As I was making my notes, I kept writing down Paka. His name's not Paka.
Oh, so also I actually wanted to talk a little bit about Kaisha Castle Hughes. That's the actress who plays Paika. And I just wanted to say that her performance to me, I thought was incredible. And I wrote some things about it here. I felt it was a breath of fresh air as she kind of took, or, you know, along with the director's guidance, she took this almost stoic and headstrong approach in her acting, you know, in her attempts to win her grandfather's approval. And she spoke with almost like this hesitation where she seemed like she was lost in this world where she needed to find herself. I thought she portrayed it perfectly in her acting.
Yeah, she was very endearing to me. Very happy. Yeah, I was very happy with her performance. That's the type of heroine I like to see.
And also, she had very expressive eyes and facial features as well. Like, even when she wasn't saying a lot, you could just you can really tell what she's feeling.
100%.
And they were so expressive during the film that, to me, she showed the confidence and qualities of like a silent film actress, pretty much. Like she could definitely jump into that. I mean, that's not very popular now, but if she were in those days, like, she would be successful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Her nonverbal performance was better than her verbal performance, honestly. I thought there were some scenes where she was a little bit weak, but then she has incredibly strong moments. The scene where she's doing her traditional song in honor of her grandfather, and she starts crying. I don't know about you guys, but I got a little misty.
That was affecting for sure.
Yeah, that felt very real.
Yeah.
I think she's a phenomenal actress. I think the direction sometimes didn't play to her strengths. There was one example when she is with her father driving away, and she starts, I guess, sensing Paikea's wail in the distance. And she says, "Stop the car." But of all the line reads that they could have used in the film, it was like, that felt like one where they had done like 50 takes, and then they just chose that one.
I 100% agree. When I was saying there were weak moments, that was one I had in mind. Stop the car. Stop the car. It was a very timid... it
was a dry read, to be honest.
It was a very dry read, and they should have done a reshoot for that. And there was no... Yeah, that was a mistake on the director's part.
I agree as well.
But speaking of that moment, this maybe was unintentional. I think Danny, we've had talks about this kind of stuff. He would say this is unintentional, but this and another moment kind of non-verbally reinforce Poro's identity, his personality maybe. One, when they're in the kitchen and Koro has to go fix a septic tank. Poro is having his breakfast and he says, "Can somebody else do it?" Right? Instead of offering to go help his father, he says, "Can't somebody else do it?" And Koro doesn't even respond. He goes off and does his duty. That, and then this moment, when they're getting out of the car, when the Paikea tells them to stop, we see a very intentional camera positioning and focus to see that he's driving a Ford Escape, and the word "escape" on the front of the car is very prominently shown. And I'm like, maybe that's just product placement, but it might be playing two hands there. It felt like that. Of course, he's driving that car, and it predominantly shows that word because that's what he's doing. That's his entire character. You know, he might call it. He would call it escaping. Others would say he's running away from his responsibilities.
Are you saying that I think it's coincidence?
Yes.
No, I don't. Actually.
Okay, cool. No, because we've had talks about these things before.
Sometimes, yeah. It depends on the moment. Or the scene, but in this particular scenario, I think I agree with you. Yeah, definitely. You can't. There's no way. Why would you frame escape like that so prominently in a shot? It makes no sense otherwise. And yeah, it was the theme of that character. Definitely. I mean, from the very beginning, he quite literally escapes. You were talking about Parangi, right? Pororangi?
Yes. I'm just going to say Poro.
Poro, okay. So yeah, from the very beginning, he pretty much leaves his family, leaves his culture, leaves his daughter, because he just doesn't want anything to do with the culture anymore. So yeah, it's definitely a representation of that.
Cool.
Regarding that first scene, if I remember correctly, Koro, the grandfather, wasn't even there. Poro, the father, wakes up, goes to have breakfast, and Koro, the grandfather's already gone.
No, he's
So
he's putting on his mud boots and leaving, and he's saying, "Where are you going, Dad?"
Did he?
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was already out the door. Okay. I thought he told that to Nanny before Poro enters.
My note was specifically about seeing him leave, so I'm sure that's what happened.
And he goes to help him, right?
He doesn't.
No.
I remember he's sitting down. He starts to eat breakfast
Mm-hmm.
that his mother made for him, and then he says that line. Well, he goes, "Where are you going, Dad?
Can't somebody else do it?"
Can somebody else do it? And then he gets up and just takes a piece of toast, and then walks away. Where does he go?
I
don't think we see.
We don't see.
I
I guess
think
you could guess that maybe he's going to help.
Yeah, he does go with him.
Oh, you don't know for sure.
He skips out on breakfast.
I just felt like he doesn't want to sit down for breakfast. He wants to get out of there.
But we never see him at the engine.
Then he's saying it's implied, obviously.
Yeah, because
Okay.
you see kind of a look on his face as he's like about to start breakfast. Hey, where are you going? Hey, can't someone else do that? And then he leaves, and he kind of just looks out, and then he's like, and he grabs toast, and the mom's like, oh, eat your breakfast, and he kind of like dismisses that and continues on. He was gonna eat his breakfast.
Well, it could be.
I think so.
Listeners, you tell us what you think. Based on his character, I say he wasn't going to help, but I'd be curious to hear other people's opinions.
I think
Right.
he was.
All right. Yeah. Did you guys have any other notes or thoughts?
I just want to shout out Poro's younger brother at the breakfast table with perfect timing.
Oh, I love
Oh, man.
Just in time to jump in and start eating his older brother's breakfast.
I thought it was so funny how you hear him stomping through the kitchen off screen like a monster's coming into the kitchen. Oh, my God. Your timing's spooky, boy. Yeah, that was great.
I guess I would say overall, since we're coming near the end of the discussion here,
Uh-huh.
it's a very solid film. If we had to give it a rating,
Okay, we're at ratings. You go first.
I figured.
Sure.
Well, what ratings do you guys want to
No,
use?
no,
Because
no, no.
I want to do differently.
Oh, yeah, feel free. I'm going to go out of 10 still.
Yeah, same.
I want to be consistent with that, but feel free.
Well, I don't want to do half scores because say if I do a whale rating, I don't want to do half a whale because that'd be weird.
That'd be inappropriate. We had enough whale deaths.
I only had like what, one?
No, they killed like 5 whales for this movie. No, just kidding.
My goodness.
You could do, whales and sea lions.
And
Those
dolphins.
count as half.
Well, I don't have a half score, so I guess it doesn't matter. I give this 8 whales out of 10.
8. All right.
Whales. Okay.
8 whales out of 10. We talked about Don't Make Me Go and the parallels to this. I think this movie does a better job showcasing that kind of story of like a parent or an older family member learning a lot of lessons through the actions and interactions with, their daughter or granddaughter in this case. I would say I probably liked the acting more in Don't Make Me Go than this one, which is why it's only a little bit higher than Don't Make Me Go. But ultimately, I think the visuals were beautiful. It's a very understated film in a lot of ways. It was distressing a bit, but it all made sense in the context of the story and the way that the directors and the filmmakers wanted to tell it. So I think ultimately, I liked it a lot. What about you guys? What do you think?
Daniel?
I kind of want to give it an 8 out of 10, but I feel like that's leaving so little room for future films. Like, it's so up there. I'm going to go with 7.5.
All right.
I think that's fair. Mostly due to some weak moments like that we've talked about earlier. Certain acting moments that felt a little dry. Well, what I did like about it overall was, one, I thought the score was very, very fitting. I loved the grounded and mystical approach to the storytelling. I loved the cinematography of the film when showing off the landscape and the nature of New Zealand. I thought that was very beautiful. And yeah, it did make me want to go visit. Usually when I thought of New Zealand, I would think more of the inland sections. I mean, due to, films like Lord of the Rings. Right. But now I got to see some of the coastal city, and that's beautiful as well. So I have more to look forward to when I go to New Zealand. And like Sean said that he preferred the acting overall in Don't Make Me Go. I will say the main actor of Don't Make Me Go was excellent to me.
Yeah.
He was up there, but I think this movie as an overall cast was better. Like, we have amazing acting from the grandfather, from the granddaughter, from the father, and the uncle.
Yeah.
All of those were really fantastic.
And Paika's friend also, Remy.
Hemi.
We'll get it right one day.
He was the same age, and I thought he was absolutely fantastic as well.
Yes.
His moment of distress when his father rejects him,
Yeah, I thought that was actually really good as well. The story was just told very beautifully. So yeah, I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10.
What do you think, Alejandro?
Well, I'm surprised how close we all are. I also give it an 8 out of 10.
Ooh.
Weaknesses are the same. Couple weak performances. I don't even want to say performances. A couple weak scenes. But I would say I think the highs in terms of acting performance in this movie are higher than Don't Make Me Go. But maybe the mean is a little bit lower.
Sure.
I agree with that.
This movie's strengths are character. I think this is a great showpiece on how to do character right. Mm-hmm. Characters that are imperfect and are struggling and going through hard times, and yet are also endearing and real and authentic. Have you guys been watching, playing, seeing, hearing anything you want to talk about?
I've been watching Better Call Saul on Netflix.
Very cool. Since
the show just wrapped up on TV. I figured, hey, why not watch starting from the 4th season, because I've already watched the first 3 seasons. And it takes forever for all the other seasons to come out on Netflix. They have to wait at least for the full season to finish, and then the new one airing before they release the previous season. So I'm starting to catch up on it, and I forgot like how good that show is. And seemingly, from what I've heard, only gets better in its latter half. So I think I'm like 3 or 4 episodes in, but it's really good.
Yeah, I'm a couple seasons behind, but I loved every moment of it.
What about you guys?
I watched American Beauty, which was not my choice. I watched it at my sister's house. And despite my misgivings about watching in the beginning, because I'm not too much of a fan of Kevin Spacey, that might be a controversial opinion. I don't know. But
not so much. Considering everything that he did,
I think I'm very brave for that stance, actually. But damn, that movie is good. That is a damn good movie. So that might be something worth talking about in the future, a future conversation about looking at the art as opposed to the artist. Could be cool. What about you, Danny?
Let's see. What have I been watching? I've been watching this relatively new show on Netflix called The Sandman.
Ooh, I've heard good things.
I'm really enjoying it, especially one of these last episodes that came out. I don't want to spoil anything, but the concept of that episode was actually amazing. I'll tell you a little bit more about it after the podcast, but I highly recommend watching The Sandman. It's really good. I think it has only 1 season though right now on Netflix. And let's see what else. Well, I was on an Alaskan cruise.
Nice.
So they started me off with like 6 channels to be able to watch things at night. And slowly, every day 1 channel will get dropped. Till eventually I had 1 channel.
Oh, no.
And this 1 channel was playing that. What's that singing a cappella movie?
Pitch Perfect?
Pitch Perfect. Oh my
Damn, how'd you get that?
goodness.
Because I'm good.
It's like 50 of those.
They played Pitch Perfect over and over again. And that is one movie I never want to see again. But that movie, I mean, it's a good movie. You know, it's fun. It's a decent comedy. But not after 10 views. I can't do it anymore.
Oh, Lord.
Very cool. So now we're at that point. Shameless plugs, promotions. Where can people find you? Let's hear it.
Nothing too big right now. Just plugging along on my educational consulting work and, hoping to get more clients and stuff like that. Other than that, just this podcast, give it a like, a rating, comment. Please, we want to engage with you guys. So, yeah, other than that, that's pretty much it from me. What about you, Danny? You got a lot more stuff.
Just a couple things.
Like 3 bands. Who cares?
Well, yeah, two of which are active
Right.
Currently, Shadow Reborn and Lipstick Alley Inc. With Shadow Reborn, we are currently in the studio. If you guys want to see updates on that, you can follow my personal page on Instagram, Daniel Alexander G92, or you can go ahead and follow Shadow Reborn. We post stories quite regularly on the, during the process of recording our different tracks for our new double EP that we're going to be releasing. Ooh. We have some shows that are going to be coming up as well throughout September and October, several, with both Lipstick Alley Inc., that's the other band you can follow on Instagram, and Shadow Reborn. So yeah, stay tuned for that. A lot of exciting stuff.
Yeah, check out the description of this podcast for the links to those Instagram pages as well.
Yeah, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, and on the social media front, Twitter and Instagram, both at Ardent Cinema. Find us there. After all, if you don't follow us there, you're going to miss out on the October lineup. And speaking of which, the first one's going to be Interview with the Vampire, 1994. Mommy. You're not going to want to miss that one. It's going to be spoopy.
Not a huge horror fan, so a little scared, but, I'm sure you'll guide me into the promised land.
I thought you were a horror fan. Didn't you? You play all the Resident Evils 30 times. You play Silent Hill. What is wrong with you?
It doesn't make sense.
I love horror games to death. I abhor horror movies.
That makes zero sense to me.
And guys, as you're listening, you will scream at me as we don't watch your favorite horror movies. You can blame me.
No.
And
we
you can
will.
You guys can leave a comment on all our social media pages on why you don't like me because we're not watching your favorite horror movie. It's my fault.
We'll be having horror movies for Halloween.
Never.
We can't fight this.
Yeah, all Halloween. Like
all Halloween.
all 30 days of October or 31 days.
Podcast every day. Tune in.
Drag me kicking and screaming because that's the only way I'll ever do it. Ever.
Alrighty.
And with that, thanks for listening, guys. We will bid you adieu.
Farewell.
Yeah.